All right, week 50, book 50, Waiting by Ha Jin. Um, this was published in 1999, I believe. 1999. And it's a story that takes place in Maoist China, starting in the late, in the mid 60s, I believe, and going through to about the mid 80s, maybe, something like that. In any case, it tells the story of a man, Lin, and he's not particularly traditional, but he's from the country. And his family finds him a very traditional wife, Shuju. And Shuju has bound feet, and she's very submissive, very old school Chinese, very traditional. And she's not very attractive, at least to Lin. And he's embarrassed by her small feet because that contradicts what he wants, which is a modern Chinese life in the city. So he is a military doctor, and he goes to work at a military hospital. And he comes back, for a week, a year kind of thing to see his wife and then his wife and his daughter. And that's pretty much, you know, what his story is, except he's not particularly happy with Shuju. He doesn't really, I mean, he had sex with her enough to produce a kid and pretty much left her alone. Um, and she is, like I said, she's very submissive, very traditional, and so she sacrifices her own happiness for his and for what he wants. And that goes on for a while, and then Lin meets a woman named Mana, Manna, and Mana and Lin start a kind of relationship. They don't have a physical relationship. Now, this is the interesting part. In Maoist China at the time, uh, having an affair and those and sort of being sexually loose could be seen as capitalistic and depraved capitalistic values and not true to um, the revolution and to China. And so it was very, very dangerous. You could be considered a counter-revolutionary, and this could destroy your career and or cause you to be imprisoned or even perhaps executed. So, very bad news for them to do this. Uh, and on top of that, traditional patriarchy is in play. So, whatever happened would happen twice as hard to Mana than it would to Lin. Now, so they go on this way for a while, and their comrades notice and ask them about it, and they make pledges to keep it celibate and platonic. And Len says he's going to go back to the country and divorce his wife as soon as he can. So he goes back to the country to divorce Shuju, and the first year he has a hard time bringing it up. And this is the interesting thing: Shuju is such a caring person that it just seems mean to want to divorce her, but he doesn't love her, and he thinks he loves this other woman. And so he's caught in this bind, and he can't get a divorce. He goes to the magistrate, and the magistrate basically says, no, no, I give you a divorce. Because, again, counter revolutionary, you have to, have the right revolutionary spirit, and apparently staying in a relationship and looking after your comrade wife was part of that. So Len goes back, and he and Mana have various fights and makeups and you know and then basically 19 years go by while this happens, or 18, 19 years, 18 years, 18 years, because there's a law that after 18 years a military man can get like basically what we would call like a no fault divorce kind of thing, and so he can get a divorce. And so the divorce is finally granted, and then he and Mana, a couple months later, get married, move in together, have lots of sex because Mana is, as it turns out, is very, very horny and more than Lynn can actually take care of. And that becomes an issue between them, her over sexualization. Then they have kids. They have a pair of twins, and she almost dies in childbirth, but I don't know, she survives. But she has a heart murmur, and she's, has develops heart problems, and as the kids grow, she is probably not going to live very long. And they start to have the problems all new parents have. The kids keep them up all night long and this kind of thing, and the kids almost die and all kind of problems, and they start hating each other and, you know, fairly typical couple things. Nothing terrible. And that's the interesting thing, except for one character who I will get to. I skipped him on purpose. I'll get to him. Everybody in this book is a good person. Shuju is a good person. Lin is a good person. He doesn't want to hurt her. He just wants to go with this other woman that he loves. That because of the arranged marriage, she didn't have a chance to meet. Um, Mana, she's a good person. She tries to move on and is stymied or prevented in various ways from moving on to other people, and she's just basically stuck. She's in love with Lin. So all the three main characters are good people. The brother, Bensheng, who gets in the way and kind of prevents the divorce happening a few times. He's not a bad person. The magistrate who denies the divorce, not a person, not a bad person. Ha Jin, Mana's friend, who ends up betraying an important secret at one point in the book, which I will get to. Not a bad person. All these people are good people. What is bad is the totalitarian, oppressive regime that is forcing people to live by these relatively arbitrary rules. There's no particular reason for these people to be together for 18 years. Um, just like, there was no particular reason for this woman, Shuju, to bind her feet. Her parents were traditional and they wanted her to bind her feet. And she was at that age where she was basically just the last generation of Chinese women that was doing that kind of thing in the countryside, basically, as my understanding is. And so, it's not her fault, but now that she is this way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all these people have been constructed by this regime. And that's the most interesting thing. Ha Jin never once criticizes the Chinese government per se, or the Chinese communist system per se. It's there, it's oppressive, and it guides the lives of everybody in the book. But there is no point where people say, let's be revolutionaries, let's overthrow the system. No, these are people who are not revolutionaries in the sense of overthrowing the revolution. They're not counter-revolutionaries. They're not trying to get rid of the Chinese Revolution. These people are just trying to live. In that sense, it bears a lot of similarity to the book, To Live, which, is that the name of the book? The one I read a while back? Yeah, I think it is. It bears some similarity to that. That survival is the point. But as that book is almost Camusian existentialism in its celebration of survival, this book is not. This book is more about how these systems just gradually degrade and degrade and degrade these people and their relationships. And that's basically what's going on here. Okay, so now the thing I skipped is there's a very disturbing scene in this book. At one point, roughly halfway, maybe slightly more than halfway, there is a essay, and it's not described deeply. It's maybe a page, but it is brutal, and the simplicity almost makes it even more brutal than otherwise would be. But because of the oppressive regime and because of the patriarchal situation, Mana can't do anything about it, because if she does, she feels that she is going to be blamed. And well, this seems very realistic in nearly any circumstance, and in this particular male dominated and oppressive society, definitely seems to be the case. She tells Ha Jin, and Ha Jin tells other people, and that's how it gets out, and other people, whisper about her and this kind of thing. And that kind of, other people being censors of everyone's behavior and actions is part of the oppression here. There's almost this Orwellian sense of everybody is watching everybody. And the reason for that is there has to be a certain amount of paranoia in this kind of totalitarian regime, because if you do something that somebody doesn't like, they can denounce you. And if they denounce you, you, at different points in the history of this revolution, could be strung up, you could be tarred and feathered or otherwise publicly shamed, you could be stripped of all your property. You could literally be beaten up and have your legs broken. So anything from public shaming to huge fines to complete financial ruin to execution, imprisonment is a possibility at different points. And it just so happens that this particular individual who does this is the only really evil character. And he is, I think, meant to symbolize the way in which this system rewards a certain kind of malevolence and a certain kind of self serving and almost sadistic, well, not almost, definitely sadistic, almost psychotic is what I meant to say, almost psychotic power. And that's exactly what this character is. He's the only one who's like this. No one else is. But he happens to off screen succeed. We hear about him later where he has succeeded in life in ways that none of the other characters have. All the other characters are surviving, they're living, but they're not thriving. And he is thriving. And that's what these kind of regimes do. This obviously has resonance with the kind of society we live in now, but I'm not going to go into that. I'll let you, if you wish, go there. But anyway, there it is. Book 50, week 50. Um, a good read, a somewhat depressing and difficult read in places. Um, and even though that essay is not extreme, a bit of a trigger warning for those people for which that bothers them. It's not dwelt on. It's not a major theme of the novel by any means, but it is there. And so, if you decide to read this book, you should know that, you know, that is there. All right, Ha Jin, Waiting. Good book.